I've been involved in, I just graduated actually last year from a leadership program through Spirit Rock. And we had all these guest teachers, and I wasn't quite sure who was coming up next. And the next person that was the guest teacher happened to be the Venerable Pannavati. And I have to tell you that before she came on, and actually the retreat before that, I had actually had my doubts about whether or not I was going to stay in the program. And after this controversial teacher had come up, and there had been some brouhaha around his teaching, and I still had this feeling in my stomach and in my heart that maybe this wasn't for me. And then she walked in. And what I saw is I saw myself. I saw a woman who looked like me, with the round Buddha face and the no hair and the bright smile. And then she began to talk. And I realized what I had been struggling with in the program was trying to fit together my language into, it was kind of like trying to fit a square in a round. And after hearing her and how profound she was and how down she was and her love of the Dharma and how she translated that, it inspired me and made me realize that I can use my own voice. I can feel myself in the Dharma differently. And at that moment, I realized that my path was even stronger than it had been before. And I immediately went up to her after her talk, and it went on and on and on, but I went up to her and I realized that almost half of the participants, and there were about 100 in our leadership program, half of them were sitting around her just on their knees and so forth, just listening to her as she spoke. And I went up to her as close as I could, and I had tears in my eyes. And I said, "Thank you for giving me my voice." I think the one thing, and there's many, but the one thing that's really clear about how she lives her life and how it impacts me and how I feel it is her service. Being of service every step of the way, every time she breathes, every time she talks, every time she walks, every time she reaches her hand out. She's of service. And it's not only an inspiration, but it strikes me as if we all should be that way, but it strikes me as almost, it's not normal. And yet it is the most normal thing. It's so dear and so inspiring for me. As an African American practitioner, and as I said, laying eyes on this woman and seeing her as an African American monastic, I thought this wasn't possible. And I really realized, although my inclination is not to do any monastic training, I realized how possible it is, first of all, for a woman. Second of all, for an African American. Third of all, for an educated woman. Fourth of all, for all the things that she has done in rural North Carolina. I realized that her fearlessness, her courage, is something that we all have within us because of our experience. There are conditions that has allowed us to survive because the outside conditions have been so harsh for so many of us. And given all of that, she has taken those steps, and I just know that I can too. I can live and breathe this unconditional love, this amazing compassion, this way of balancing my life and being of service. And not just specifically to me, but to my community, to the larger community and specifically to the African American community, to elders, to youth, to those who are suffering in ways that I can't even imagine. Yeah, I think the intersection of how she comes, her relationship with the community and that place that you say is that place of liberation and freedom, it's so palpable. She recognizes that the conditions that have created the suffering in our lives, the cycle can stop. And that as she said, she's taken 75 kids. Doesn't seem like a lot, but each one teach one. And so she realizes, first of all, she knows where she came from. You know, she was raised in D.C. She has had that experience of being in Chocolate City and has raised children and has had a very full life. So she recognized, she never shies away from who she is and where she came from. And so how she relates to that place, because she knows what isn't freedom. And when I see her and hear her like this evening, that freedom lies so deeply in her heart. And it also lies in her mind. Because she realizes that in our communities today, part of what keeps us from being free and liberated is the confines of our own minds. And she has stepped beyond that in such a beautiful, almost effortless, although I know it hasn't been, way that it is indeed inspiring. Well, I think what I would say to people who've never met or heard her, this is the Venerable Pannavati, is be ready. Be absolutely ready for first the truth, and second of all, for a down-home sister who tells it exactly as it is from her own lived life and experience. And that is the voice that we need to hear. And that's the reflection that I'm so grateful to be able to mirror myself with. Yeah, she's quite a delight. But just watch out. She's powerful. She's super powerful.